Good evening, good morning, wherever you're listening from around the world on the Polynesian Eyes podcast. We're excited to have another live digital kava session here at the Polynesian Eyes location. And we're really excited for the show today. Have some interesting items for viewers and listeners to consider and to listen to. We'll be discussing some topics that have come up in regards to genetic studies by the follow up to our last live digital kava session where we reviewed the genomic studies by Alexander Iolandis and some of the feedback and the activity we're seeing on social media from that video and certain claims that are being made. And also going to do some review and responses to some feedback we've been getting from our short videos shared on YouTube from our discussion with Jake Fitzemanu and certain content creators, I guess, who like to comment and give feedback on that. And we'll kind of talk. There's a little bit of history with this specific content creator and his 2 cents, and he shares, and we encourage people to give feedback and give their perspectives. Uh, but there's always consequences. There's always consequences. And, just like we recognize when we come out into the court of public opinion here in the digital court of public opinion, it's free game. Everybody has an opportunity to respond, react. And then we're going to do a relatively, maybe it's not quite a deep dive, but we're going to spend some time walking through the oral history legal system that exists in Hamoa and how that process works and why that's important as part of our considerations and how we should properly view oral history. And just to remember, not all oral histories are created alike or equal. And that is one of the challenges of oral history is at the end of the day, it's basically a story. And when you have a story, it's kind of easy to come up with another story. And if it's only stories, then then there's a lot of confusion that can come out of that. But as always, we are very appreciative of the paying members on our YouTube channel. Uh, really appreciate it. Really mindful. We do try to make content as often as possible for our paying members on the channel. Primarily, we do release our guest videos first to paying members and then allow that to follow through eventually to everyone else on the podcast. As always, we are going live here in the live digital kava session on Facebook, YouTube, Patreon, Instagram, and X or Twitter. So please feel free to like, subscribe, share, and comment. All of those go a very long way to supporting the channel. I think we're averaging 100,000 views just on YouTube alone. And on Facebook, we're just under 500,000 views every 28 days. And so that is tremendous exposure that we're getting on social media. And that doesn't include what we get on, you know, X, Instagram, Patreon, and some of the other areas that we do our live digital kava sessions. We share the short videos and then also the official episodes on the podcast as we release them. So appreciate it all. As always, feel free to interact, post comments, post feedback. We try to integrate those as much as possible, but we definitely make an exception or focus on those who share a comment via super chats. We equate that to a digital kava bag. It's a way to, contribute to the effort that we're doing here on the Polynesian Eyes podcast. And then it's also a way to highlight your question and your comment. And for our paying members, one of the benefits of being a paying member on the YouTube channel is you get the icon next to your name. So we recognize you and we do make an effort to bring up your comments because you're a paying member. We do have a handful of paying members that prefer their comments not to be shown. If that's the case, please let us know and we'll just kind of reference your comments rather than bringing it up. But with that being said, I think it's showtime. I think it's time to kind of get into the meat of the show today. So we're going to start with the Alexander Ioannidis map. Okay, so our last digital kava session, we kind of walked through this genomic study. It's been thrown around a lot on social media saying, you know, David Burley's genomic studies point to the Tonga as the origin is outdated and you need to put that away. David Burley needs to sit down, take a seat, and you know submit that Samoa is the origin for Polynesia. Hey, Moku, Mika, appreciate it, man. Thank you for the shout out. Malo, appreciate all the comments and the support online. So what specifically am I referring to? So what we're going to do is we're going to bring up and we're just going to walk through a short clip of our video, the short that was on social media, just released yesterday, I think, or the day before. And then I really want to comment on some of the feedback that we're getting on that. So that's what we're gonna head to. I'm looking at the video here. Looks like the comments need to refresh it here so that the comments pop back up. You're commenting is okay. I know why. It is because I changed to a different profile. So I'll have to shift back to the other profile. Anyways, I'll take care of that. I'll bring this video up real quick. Let me just search through it and confirm the video here real quick. Apologize to everyone online. Hey, Clarity, not sure what that is. I like the profile pic there, but low quality polycarbonate. I don't know what you're referring to, but give some more context to it. Let's just go and share it. Share this for now. Share screen. And it is this one. We'll bring this up so everyone can kind of see it here real quick. And I'll reset this to get the banner out of the way so we can have some more clarity. And book came out in 2023. We'll watch this from the beginning. And in this video, I just read through the summary of the paper or the genomic study by Alexander Ioannidis, and it was just kind of some feedback on it, and then we'll take a look at that and then go from there. Okay, so people read this, right? They read this and then they go, oh my goodness, Polynesia originates from Samoa, right? And they jump to that conclusion. So they run around and tell each other, yep, there's new genetic studies. All of Polynesia comes from Samoa, and that's where the disbursement goes. And they see David Burley on the Polynesian Eyes podcast. They watch the episode, they see the shorts, and then they jump in the comments. Tua, new genetic studies prove that David Burley is wrong because these new 2021, and we get this all the time, right? Everybody's always jumping in, trying to do a gotcha on us, right? And they're all jumping in, trying to say, we got you. We got the Polynesian Eyes podcast. All they want to do is lie, cheat, and steal. That's all they're doing from there, right? And we always get this, and every time we dig into it, it just gets worse and worse. What was supposed to be the evidence, what was supposed to be the knockout blow against our position, ends up being a knockout blow for the person who threw the first punch, right? So it's just kind of interesting. It's kind of funny. Hey, want to shout out to Mel. Thank you, Mel. Appreciate it. As you can see, Mel is a paying member on the Polynesian Eyes channel. So thank you very much. Always a pleasure, Mel, to have you. Thank you for the support. So let's come back to the video here real quick. Even though David Burley's book came out in 2023. But anyways, we'll just regard that for a second. But this genetic studies say that Polynesia originates from Samoa, right? And I can see how you came to that conclusion, though one would like, just from reading this, and you look at the dates, 11th century, 12th century, even the youngest Tuitonga lines say that Tuitonga is at 900 AD. So there seems to be a difference there. So that is something that we're seeing at the moment, right? Now, that's what we're facing, and that's a lot of the comments we get online, right? So let's do this. Okay. So that's what we're dealing with, right? These people, they throw that out there and they come out this. We walk through that study, and lo and behold, we find out the study is not even talking about the origins of Polynesia. And we'll walk through it a little bit again. We'll walk through it again. We'll hold everybody's hand. We'll sing Kumbaya, and we'll walk through it again in a smaller fashion today because we got some other things to get to. And I'm glad to see Joe. Joe says, Willie, you mentioned Burley's published date, but none of the cited DNA studies say what you claim. Okay, buddy. We'll walk through it again today. We did it on our last live digital kava session. We'll walk through it again today to a proportion, and then we'll address you. You confuse the published date of Burley's book with the published date of the DNA studies. Okay, that's fine. But we're going to do an analysis today because apparently we can't just speak figuratively, Joe, and just have you compare and contrast this in your thoughts. We're going to compare and contrast the two studies side by side in a table, and we'll walk right through it. Right? And so that's something that we'll do. Stick around, Joe. Actually, this is for you. I don't know why the share screen here didn't show your comment, but this is your map. We're going to walk through your map, Joe. And we're going to help you. Right? We're going to help you, Joe, so that you can just, share the map. I'm sure you'll keep sharing it, but you can at least feel comfortable knowing that you were educated on the map, and that as you share that map, I can, with free conscience, just say you're being silly with that map, right? And we'll pull up that map, Joe. Don't worry. We'll pull up the map. Another funny comment here from Garbens is, how do I stop my crippling phone addiction? I don't know, Garbens. But since you're on the Polynesian Eyes podcast, keep watching. We're going to promote that addiction moving forward. So stay on here with us and we'll deal with that. Joe, Ioannidis study gives migration dates older than the dates of the Catholic and Baker lists of Tuitongas. No, it's not. But well, a little bit, but we'll deal with that. We've already addressed that in many ways. Um, but anyways, let's do that. So Joe and Joe's compadres, they all over posting things, and let's pull up what they're posting. So what is the knockout blow that Joe and his crew are saying this solves everything and it blows us out of the water? Well, let's take a look at this amazing map here, real quick, that Joe and his compadres are so excited about. We'll pull it up, share the screen. Let's go to a window, pull up this window. All right. This is the almighty map of Joe. And Joe, just like everyone else, we will walk through this map. Right. So here's the map. You can see right here on the top. Let me click on it so you can see my mouse. Right here, you can see that this is from the study that we walk through paths and timings of peopling of Polynesia inferred from genomic networks, right? And it shows here coming from Samoa to Fiji, which is funny because Fiji is Melanesian. So basically, you're saying Fijians come from Polynesians, which is that alone should tell you something, Joe. That this map is something else than what you think it is. And then it also shows Tonga, right? And we see here to the right, arrow direction and width from range expansion statistics. So the width of the arrows speak to, you know, the range expansion statistics. So I'm assuming higher impact, whatever it is, but it's the thickest to Fiji. I don't know, Joe. Last time I looked at Fiji, they didn't look like Samoans. They look like Melanesians, the majority of them, right? Outside of Tongan influence in Fiji. Next thing is route from allele frequency divergence, branching sequence. Number 3, the branching sequence. So here's the sequence. It's saying, according to Joe, people came to Samoa, went to Fiji. That's the first branch. Then the second branch, according to Joe, goes to Tonga. And then 3, and then 4 is the date, right? Date of population split from exponential decay. Look at what's funny here, Joe. You notice the Fiji and Tonga right off the bat doesn't have any dates. Why is that? That alone should tell you something. And I've been repeating this many times over. You notice all the dates here, all throughout here. Let me bring my mouse here. The dates, no dates to Fiji, no dates to Tonga, but the first date goes to Rarotonga. That's the first date. Why is that, Joe? Wasn't this a genomic study that you said that proves the origin of all Polynesia? But there's no dates to Fiji and Tonga. Number one, it points to Fiji, right? Then it points to Tonga, and it has no dates for Fiji or Tonga. Then the first date is when you first heading towards Eastern Polynesia. Well, maybe it's because they have no data for Fiji and Tonga, Joe. If they had data for Fiji and Tonga, they would have put the dates there, Joe. Okay. So number one, not only does the arrows don't make sense, and I don't gotta, this is before you even dig into the study. We're just looking at the map, the almighty map, Joe, the map that you're sharing all over on social media. Maybe there's a couple other people. The map that you keep saying proves the origin of Western Polynesia, yet there's 0 dates for Western Polynesia. And what have I been telling you? This study by Alexander Ioannidis, or whatever is his last name, is about expansion into Eastern Polynesia. And you have the audacity to make the comment, don't when we say this on our live digital kava sessions, you go out there and say, don't listen to these layman interpretations. Look at the map. Okay, Joe, I'll forget everything that I know is reality and I'll entertain your path to knowledge, right? And I look at it and I say, Joe, your own map that's supposed to be the secret weapon, the silver bullet, doesn't even have data on Western Polynesia. So I don't even have to go look at and read through the whole study or analyze it or have Grok analyze it. And before anybody says anything about Grok, we have the paid version of Grok. And Grok is smarter than all PhD experts in every specialty combined. Okay. They're light years ahead. Okay. And so that's the first thing without even going anywhere. You lost me right there, Joe. You lost me right there. You lost the whole whatever right there. But because we care about you, Joe, because we care about your knowledge, we care about the fact that maybe this is going to give you a sleepless night. We're going to help you. We're going to help you, give you the data so you can have a good night's rest knowing, ah, Alexander Ioannidis was not talking about Western Polynesia. And my all powerful map confirms it. Right? So we'll do that. Well, does that sound good? So this question, Jess here is very adamant. Has brought this question up. Why does Samoa not have dates too? Because they don't have data on that. If they had data on it, they would have put it in there. And the reason why it doesn't, because the whole study, Jess, was not looking for the origin of West Polynesia. And Western Polynesia would have Tonga, Samoa, Uvea, Futuna, Tokelau, right? All these pillars of Western Polynesia, right? So, with that being said, we see here, just to finish it off, this map, where it has dates, tracks migrations to the east, right? So you can see all of this. It starts off, it goes to Rarotonga, then it works its way, pushing its way towards Society Islands and Tahiti. Then it works its way to the Tuamotu Islands. Then it works its way to Marquesas and Eastern Polynesia, all works all the way out there. Okay. So that's what that shows. And then eventually to Rapa Nui. Now, we have Grok here. Is going to give us an analysis of what's going on here. And we're going to walk through it, Joe. We're going to walk through it and we'll have a discussion on it. We'll review this study again because I can understand this. I can appreciate this, Joe. I learned by repetition. We'll run the reps, right? I played football, I played rugby. Reps matter. So maybe this is just a matter of reps, Joe. Joe and all those online. Figure 2 from the 2021 Nature paper. Paths and timings of the peopling of Polynesia inferred from genomic networks by Ioannidis et al. And there's a handful of other scientists. So just make sure it's the right one. Yep, it's the right paper. All right. represents a schematic reconstruction of migration paths and population divergence, timing based on genetic data from 430 modern individuals across 21 Pacific island populations, including both Western, example, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, and Eastern Polynesian groups. The analysis uses ancestry specific computational methods to infer a serial founder expansion pattern characterized by sequential bottlenecks and loss of genetic diversity as populations branched out. So basically, they got DNA from people in Western Polynesia, Eastern Polynesia, and then they showed the density of the DNA and how it dilutes a little bit as you're going east, and they can track those changes of the genetic material and how it changes and give dates that shows this whole expansion. That's how the dates are formulated, right? And then the thickness of the arrows give the range of expansion and then also the frequency of the divergence of the genetic material. Okay, clarification on the scope of the study, Eastern versus Western. The study primarily reconstructs the later, let's repeat, later expansions into Eastern Polynesia. The map tells us that, but we'll just walk through it again. Expansion into Eastern Polynesia, example, Cook Islands, Society Islands, Tuamotu, blah, 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 starting around 800 to 1200 AD. It does not determine or focus on the initial origins of Western Polynesia, Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji. Hence, why there's no dates to Samoa, for Samoa and for Tonga and for Fiji. That was not the focus of the study. Okay? Write that down, Joe. Copy it, paste it, and maybe you can paste that on all the comments and all the maps that you're putting everywhere. Okay? Instead, the paper treats Samoa as an ancestral hub or starting point for genetic model of these later migrations. Assuming it's an assumption, it's not a data point that has been genetically studied and pushed out. They're using it as Samoa is part of Western Polynesia. We're going to use it as a starting point. Use that as an inferred or an assumed position because the paper is not focusing on the origin and the start of Western Polynesia. It just assumes Western Polynesia is the beginning of the Polynesian Empire and will use that as a starting point and compare it to Eastern Polynesia. So, as the ancestral hub or starting point for the genetic model of these later migrations, assuming it represents the core Polynesian population from which eastern branches diverged. Western islands like Tonga and Fiji are included in the genetic data set and shown on the map for what? Context. That's all it's doing, Joe. It's showing Tonga and Fiji to say, yeah, that's part of Western Polynesia. We all know that's the origin, comes from there. But we're going to use Samoa as the launch point. But it really is, when we say Samoa, let me translate to you. It just Samoa means Western Polynesia in this map. Okay, it's representative of Western Polynesia. But their paths, example, the arrow from Samoa to Tonga lacks specific divergent dates because the study's inferences emphasize eastern splits. Once again, that's why little data over here, lots of data over here, different colors, has dates, right? The sizes of the arrows are more, there's more differences in the sizes of the arrows, right? More data. Okay, Joe? All right, let's come back. Role of Samoa and Taiwan. Samoa is depicted as the central origin for the expansion's emphasis, reflecting its position as a genetic proxy for the ancestral population in this model. The arrow from Taiwan to Samoa symbolizes the broader Austronesian roots. Now, this is important. Remember that the assumption here is Austronesian and Southeast Asian intermix. Taiwan, Papua New Guinea, and this is important because we're going to do an analysis and a comparison of what David Burley did and what Alexander Ioannidis did here. So this is important. Okay. The arrow from Taiwan to Samoa symbolizes the broader Austronesian roots, Taiwan being the likely homeland of Austronesian languages and peoples. But this is a simplified representation. I told you this a million times. The paper doesn't reconstruct detailed paths or timings from Taiwan through near Oceania, example, Philippines and Melanesia, to Western Polynesia. That earlier phase, pre 800 BCE, is outside the study scope. This is what we're trying to tell people online. You keep using data incorrectly, just like the languages. People were jumping online. The languages say Samoa is the origin. Blah, 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 blah. We go look at the study, the scope of the study, and the data of the study almost said the opposite of that. Right? We were told, oh, the Tuimanua, archaeological things, that's Tuimanua. It's like, we go look at the Tuimanua. What do we find? Ufi pits. If you know, you know. If you don't know, go search Ufi pits in our videos and then you'll know. Okay? All right. As the genetic signals for those ancient events are harder to isolate in modern genomes. So they weren't able to isolate the genomes as you proposed and you're promoting. So once again, before you call and we are laymen, we're not experts, but apparently our interpretations is not as layman as your interpretations, Joe. Okay? And we're going to get to the story of Bo later on. Another guy, story of Bo. We're going to deal with him. These are the kind of people we got to deal with these days. Right? Here I am, 2:30 in the morning in my side of the world because we got to deal with these people. Because why? Because I have a job, right? I got 8 kids. I got a lot of stuff going on. But then when I read this stuff online, and I don't know if I should feel bad, should feel sad, or whatever, but we'll do what it takes, Joe. And I'm doing it for free, right? I mean, we're doing it for free. This is the live digital kava session at 2:30 in the morning, Pacific time. Okay. And so let's go down to the timing and the dates. All dates on the map, example 8:30 for Rarotonga, blah, 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 are in Common Era or, AD and derived from exponential decay of identity by descent segments, estimating when populations split genetically. These align with archaeological estimates for Eastern Polynesian settlements, but do not apply. My goodness, how many times does this have to be done? Right? Do not apply to Western Polynesia's initial peopling. The absence of dates on paths to Tonga or Fiji underscores that the study isn't dating their origins. Okay? What the map indicates and doesn't indicate. This is going to be learning by repetition. We're going to do the reps. We're going to do the reps, Joe. The map illustrates a branching network of genetic relationships and migration routes inferred from metrics like allele frequency divergence, shared drift, and expansion statistics, not a literal geographic or chronological map of all Polynesian settlement. It shows Samoa as the first in the context of this Eastern focused expansion model. Write that one down. Add that to the list, Joe. But this doesn't imply it was the absolute origin of Western Polynesia. Rather, it highlights Samoa's role as the gateway for the rapid directional push into remote Oceania, Eastern Polynesia, after a pause in Western Polynesia. We've accepted this, right? We've accepted, and we think, yeah, that probably makes sense, right? You look at the map, Samoa makes logical sense as a launching point into Eastern Polynesia. That makes perfect sense. And so it is something that we're open to, and we're not, that gets thrown at us. Oh, yeah, everybody in Eastern Polynesia mentions Samoa. It's like, yeah, that's fine. Question is, well, who's before that? Right? And just because Eastern Polynesia doesn't know Tonga, well, when you're that young, when like me, I'm the young one in my a lot of my family and stuff. I know my grandparents, not very good with the great great grandparents and all that other stuff. But the older ones, the older siblings, the older aunties and uncles, they know that stuff. I'm the version of Eastern Polynesia. And if I only know my great grandfather or my grandfather, i.e., Samoa, that doesn't mean that my great grandfather didn't have a great 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 grandfather. And that's all we're saying, right? All right. All right. So I think we kind of like, okay, we smashed that to smithereens, right? Right. Who is this? Jess. Jess is very active here. Oral traditions will always outdate any interpretations or archaeological findings of Europeans. The Pe'a didn't last long. It comes down through generations, just like Samoa oral tradition. It never changes. And you agree with our Samoan oral traditions when it suits you. But once we say Tu'imanua is the oldest empire, you disagree. Yes, we have a show for you today. We are going to dissect, we are going to investigate, and we'll break down for you why we have questions about Samoan oral tradition. Okay? You and the story of Bo. Okay? We're going to walk through that. We're going to walk through it and show you why, Jess, that's a problem. Okay? I'll give you a preview. You know the Pule Malay? You're probably excited about the Pule Malay. You probably think that's, slam dunk evidence. Well, we already broke that down, just like oral history. There's oral histories there that say Pule Malay. We have no idea what that is. We never heard that word, but it's all over. It's all over the internet. That's what the whole world is talking about. Pule Malay, Pule Malay. Oh, it's amazing, right? But what about the people that lived for generations where the quote unquote Pule Malay is? Right? There's a new oral tradition going around the world. You go and you search all around the world, Pule Malay. Oh my gosh, you'd think that everybody in Samoa said, oh yeah, the Pule Malay is the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? There are recorded interviews of the locals. You know what they say, Jess? They say we've never heard the term Pule Malay. You know what term they have heard, Jess? Patonga. And you know what they say? It was built for the Tuitonga, and that the Tuitonga resided there. And when the Tongans would come, that's where they would come, because that's where the Tuitonga was when they would visit. Somehow, some way, when you search Pule Malay in the new, we'll just call it the Pule Malay, new Pule Malay oral history that is run out throughout the world. That's what the world hears. Just like the Tu'imanua. Tonga was fighting for its life, right? To stay independent. Tonga was trying to keep itself alive and independent. And when we did survive and maintain our independence, we didn't have access to the outside world the same way the colonized. There are pros and cons. Getting colonized, there are cons, but there's pros. Pros is access to foreign world. That's why a lot of people in Samoa are able to go to New Zealand and America generations before Tongans were. Why? Because Tongans didn't have that access, didn't have that benefit, didn't have the investment, right? That can come with it. But that that are just pros and cons, and it's fine. But we're using the Pulimele as an example of this, right? The whole story around the world is Pulimele, this, and that. And the poor people in the village who've lived there for generations, nobody heard about the Patonga. Nobody's talking about, oh, Pulimele is actually at the Patonga, and the Tuitonga used to reside there. Nobody's talking about that. That's not the story on 99% of the data out there. That's an example. Well, we're going to get into it more, Jess. Don't worry. We have a show for you today. You stick around, Jess. We'll dive into that even more. All right. So we're done with that. We're done with that. That's something that we kind of dived into. So we really just looking at the map. The map's done, Joe. Put the map to bed. But we're not going to stop there, right? Because we care about you, Joe. We care about you. We want you to understand what's going to happen. Okay? All right. Let's come up here. So, we're going to skip a lot of this, right? And we're just going to do the genomic studies that Burley did was on the genetic material he found in Nukuleka and compared it. Actually, you know what? Let's just go through the dang thing. Why not? So he has archaeological evidence, linguistic evidence, expansion model. We're going to focus on the genomic. We'll skip that other stuff. While Burley is primarily an archaeologist and did not conduct genomic sequencing himself, his research has collaborated with geneticists by providing ancient skeletal remains and contextual data from Tongan sites. Now, this is the funny thing, guys, right? We interview Burley. He talks about the genetic studies that have happened. And you know what a lot of people first jump out and say? Well, Burley's an archaeologist. He's not a geneticist. He has no business doing that. Guys, David Burley he's not new to this game, guys. He didn't just wake up yesterday and make up some oral history. The guy's been doing it for 30 years. He's been doing archaeology around the world. So he's dealing with experts. He knows how to do things correctly. And because of his work, because of his credentials, because of the scope of what he does, he crosses and collaborates with the experts in other fields. So he didn't do the genetic studies himself, but he worked with experts who conducted the genetic studies and gave him the data. Okay? He incorporates ancient DNA findings to bolster his archaeological narrative, particularly in his book published discussions. Key studies he references or contributed to include a 2016 paper that was called Nature Paper on Southwest Pacific Peopling. Burley provided chronological and site data for this study, okay, which analyzed ancient DNA from one individual in Tonga, okay, to 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, and 3 in Vanuatu. The findings show that these early Lapita associated people had nearly 100% East Asian ancestry with minimal Papuan / Melanesian admixture. So let's understand this. Okay. The very first, according to this study, the very first settlements of Tongans in Tonga had 0 Melanesian blood. Okay. So before this is what happens with oral history. Oh, the Tongans came about because Samoans mixed with Fijians and then Tongans came about. Well, the genetic study says the first Tongans had 0 Melanesian blood. So this idea that Tongans didn't exist until Samoans mixed with Fijians, just take that off the table. Okay? Take it off the table, right? And why is that important, right? With minimal Papuan Melanesian admixture, contrasting with modern Polynesians, which includes everybody, Western Polynesia, Eastern Polynesia. If you're Polynesian, which are all of us today, we're modern Polynesians. Okay? Who have about 25% Papuan ancestry from later interactions. Burley interprets this as evidence that the initial migrants to Tonga were a quote unquote pure Austronesian group from the West, and that Polynesian genetic and cultural identity formed in Tonga before spreading east. This resolves debates by confirming no significant pre-Lapita Papuan influence in remote Oceania, supporting Tonga's role as the entry point and origin. Okay? So, you see how that arrow, that Samoa pointing to Fiji? Doesn't make sense, Joe? Because Fiji is Melanesian. And the initial settlers of Tongatapu had zero Melanesian blood or genetic material. Go and ask Alexander what was the point of the map, and he'll say, "Hey, Joe, I'll be Alexander for you today. Joe, please don't go on Facebook and say that Tonga and Fiji come from Samoa. I just try to put it in there so you have an idea that all these people are related. Okay, that's why I didn't put any dates on Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga because that wasn't part of the study, Joe. Please don't do that. Okay. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you pushing out my stuff, mentioning my name. It'll probably drive a few more clicks, maybe a few more people reading my paper. But if they read my paper, they'll find out that you're incorrect. So please do that for me. Right? Okay. Integration with broader genomics. In his book and talks, Burley discusses how ancient DNA aligns with his Bayesian modeling of settlement dates. Example, a 2015 paper he co-authored on Polynesian chronology. He explains genomics in lay terms are tracing genetic footprints that corroborate archaeological evidence. The Tongan aDNA sample links directly to East Asian origins, with subsequent admixture occurring after Polynesian culture was established in Tonga. This counter models of heavy Melanesian influence during initial migrations. More recent studies, example 2020 and 2024 papers on Pacific mitogenomes, build on this. So even the more recent studies are confirming 2020 and 2024 papers confirm David Burley's position. But Burley emphasizes the 2016 work as pivotal for confirming Tonga's primacy. So even though he says 2020 and 2024 papers continue to build on that position, he still points back and says those are add-ons. The 2016 data is the pivotal data. That was the game changing because everybody was saying, Southeast Asians come, they mix with the Melanesians, and then the Melanesians came into Polynesia. We have just smacked that idea. Don't ever bring that, don't ever bring that over here. Okay? And some people try to bring up, the people didn't like David Burley when he said Polynesians come from Fiji. When David Burley first came to Tonga, he started to tell that narrative because that was the narrative in the academia and beyond the academia, right? It's like, oh yeah, Polynesians come from Southeast Asia. They come mixed with the Melanesians, and then they come to Tonga. And a Tongan lady walks up to David Burley and goes, if you came and told us we came from Samoa, we might believe you because we look like the Samoans. But when you tell us we come from Fiji, we look at the Fijians and we say, we don't look like the Fijians. Look at how powerful common sense sometimes can be. Not always, but common sense can be very powerful. This lady just sat there and said, I'm calling BS, David. You're telling me I come from the Melanesians and I don't see how that is. I would rather believe that we came from the Samoans. I might believe that. Obviously, she seems to believe Tongans are the originals. But if she says, if you said I came from Samoa, we originate from Samoa, we might believe you. Right. And so that eventually stuck with him. And as he did his archaeological work and the genetic work and all these things, the pottery, lo and behold, the Tongan lady was right. Right? The Tongan lady was right. Because when they took the genetic material from the first Tongans who arrived in Tonga 3,000 ish years ago, no Melanesian, no Melanesian blood. Okay. Let's read the summary. In summary, Burley's book and research position Tonga as Polynesia's origin due to its earliest settlement dates, cultural innovations, and that's what he talks about. There's things that are discussed in there, and we've mentioned it on other podcasts. The pit farming techniques, a very ingenious way where you can layer different types of soil and grow taro in the middle, bananas and stuff on the side. It'll collect and it'll hold the water. That is a farming technique that you need to survive on some of these small atolls that has sandy soil where it rains and the water just dissipates in the sandy soil. This technique of farming, which the oldest examples of it are found in Tonga, are found throughout Polynesia and were critical for survival on some of these islands. As we stay true, a lot of comments. We're not going to get to every comment. However, we make an effort. Mel says, what about Luaniwa, Ongtong Java? I'm not aware of that, Mel. Not familiar. So maybe some more context if you want to add to that. That will help. Maybe we can have some conversation, but I'm not familiar with that. All right. The comparison. We're going to do the comparison. We're just going to jump to the table here. Okay. How can I get this so I can see the full table? What do I need to do here? I can't see the full table. All right. Let's see here. Okay, we have Alexander's genomic findings, David Burley's genomic findings, what Burley's approach proves, what Ioannidis's approach proves. How do I click this? I didn't have this problem earlier. Well, maybe the universe is trying to help Joe here because he's taking a beating tonight. We'll just go through a couple of these. We'll just do the first two. Sorry, can't see the entire data here. So the aspect, primary focus, David Burley's genomic findings interpretations is initial Lapita settlement in Tonga 3,000 years ago and the Situ cultural evolution in Western Polynesia, Tonga as the birthplace. References studies like Scotland 2016, analyzing ancient DNA from Tongan burials. Alexander's one, later serial founder expansion from Samoa into Eastern Polynesia and Native American admixture. Based on genome-wide data, we already kind of read that, 430 people. Key difference, Burley emphasizes early origins and minimal external influence. Ioannidis details later internal migrations and external contacts. Burley contests Samoa's primacy while Ioannidis starts expansion from Samoa, right? Going to the east. This is basically just a combination of what we've already talked about. So I don't know if we want to waste our time with that. Anyways, think we beat this to death, right? Beat the dang thing to death. The horse is dead. It's time to take it and make lo'i hoshi rather than kicking it. Let's not waste it. Let's not waste it, Joe. You know? But with that being said, I think we're done with that segment. Jeez, we spent about an hour on it. So we're going to move on to the next one. Let's see. Yeah, we've done the map. We took care of the map. Story of who? Story of Bo is who we're talking about here. And we're gonna get to that here in a second. Right? We're gonna get to the story of Bo. I don't know if you guys remember how convenient Jess was here. We mentioned the Ufi pits. And we did this video on, well, we did a study, said the Tu'imanua archaeology, the first settlement of the Tu'imanua, they did archaeological studies. And not only did they say it was only 500 years old, which is extremely young, but then, once again, oral history, Jess from Facebook, oral history said all the some piles of rocks that were noted by the archaeologists, right? They identified these piles of rocks close to the residence of the Tu'imanua, and they turned to the people on Manua Island, on Ta'u Island in Manua, and say, "What are these piles of rocks?" And they say, "Mr. Scientist, let me tell you what the oral history says." The oral history says, and I'm going to try and do the story of Bose. Anciently, the Tu'imanua was so sacred and so powerful that everyone in Polynesia knew, and everyone in Samoa knew, and everyone wanted to touch the feet of the Tu'imanua. So when the Tu'imanua died, the most loyal, right? The most loyal supporters of the Tu'imanua and then Ngafa. Usually, I don't know what that means. I think it's lineage, just because it says it in the video. That they wanted to be buried next to the Tu'imanua, and that's what those piles of rocks are. That's what the oral history said, Jess from Facebook. And so the archaeologists are like, all right, these are burial sites. We've got the green light. Even though everyone online says they've never done archaeological studies on in Manua and in the Tu'imanua sites. But there are archaeologists there. They got permission. They dig into these Tu'imanua burials, or loyal people said. And Nuns, who's this guy? Ooh, Nun said that's not what the logo said. How did I get that info? You're gonna attack me, eh? Okay, all right, Nuns. Go. You have beef with that. Go talk to the archaeologists, which included a Palangi, a Samoan, and I think he was an Indian guy. But the Samoan and the Indian guy were both faculty and professors at National Samoa University. Okay. So your beef is with them. I'm just telling you what they said. Okay. And they gave it. It's on video. It's on video. It's on a paper that was published in a scientific journal. Getting the cough here, people. So if you have a problem with it, nuns, go talk to them. It's not my problem. Apparently, it's you have a problem with it. So, all right. So they go dig it up. They find it. It's no bones. Not only there's no bones, they find out it's not a burial place, but it's Ufi pits, a place to store Ufi. Right? And so that's oral history, Jess. That's why we don't just believe every oral history. Tevita Toefoki 452 says, tell him I tauta. Right, Tevita? I'm just telling the message. I'm not the one who made the message. Okay? Malo, Tevita. Appreciate the support as a paying member. Thank you very much. Anyways, to continue the story, Um, we made the video, and then we said, wait a second, Ufi pits? And I'm like, I've been to Samoa, didn't see a single Ufi when I was in Samoa. And, that's just observation. And I asked Mr. Aotearoa. Mr. Aotearoa lived in Samoa for a few years. I said, Masi, you see a lot of Ufi when you were in Samoa? He goes, no. No, really? And he says, how many times you eat Ufi? He's like, maybe twice in 2 years. Never really saw it at the markets. And then he said, and the Ufi that I ate, it's like a Ufi vow. He said it's not even like the Ufi that we're familiar with in Tonga. He says it just kind of Ufi vow. It just grows on its own. Because we all know Ufi, Mahino Foko Ufi is achy, right? Because it's like a achy. It requires a lot of attention. It requires a lot of time and energy to bring the fruit, right, the crop to fruition. And so we had that conversation. Is oh yeah, wait, small, kind, friendly fire. Kataki nuns. Kataki. This is what happens sometimes. I'll go ahead tao. Ki confused pek out tao fun na tavare. So appreciate it. My bad. My bad. We can hug and make up later, nuns. Okay. That's funny. Malo, malo kataklahi nuns. So we go back and forth, and it's like it doesn't make sense, man. Like to Imanua eating ufi, that almost sounds like that to Imanua's tongue. So we were just, small kind of observation, throwing it out. We cut up the video, and Mr. Bo himself, right? And we were just talking about, so we're talking about it. Must have seen it here and there, but it's mostly Ufivao, whatever you want to call it. And then homeboy right here, and we're gonna visit a couple videos of his. Apparently, he's a content creator. So this guy, people love this guy. Apparently, he's the guru. Still, I can't believe they say all this stuff about the yams are eaten by all Pacific people, blah, 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 blah. Right? And there's people here who are like, man, so glad you responded. This one's funny. This one's funny. Okay. I know it's intended as a jab, maybe. You're my favorite transgender YouTuber. Hey, the one and only Nicole. Why you gotta do that to me, man? I'm gonna go loud tongue. Now you're gonna create a rumor. I'm gonna cut this up and put it on. Maybe the one and only is a robot. And right when I brought up the story of Bo, this comment popped up. So maybe the robot saw story of Bo, because I know it's not me. No, it's not me, the one and only Nicole. Don't get that, you go, eh? Anyways, so the guru content creator, the story of Bo coming in for the knockout blow. So we'll listen. We'll listen to the story of Bo.
Talo Falava, what's up, everyone?
Aloha.
This video is a reply to one of the videos that was put out by Polynesian Ice, a Tongan podcast, which is a very biased take in the relationship between Samoa and Tonga.
Very biased, right? Simply because we look at the data, we look at all the information, and we say, doesn't sound like Samoa is the center of Polynesia. Doesn't sound like Samoa. We're like that lady. We're like when we started this podcast, there were two primary objectives, right? One, document our father's work. My father's been doing this work, I don't know, 40 years, dedicated his life. My dad's been working on this information for years and years and years. Okay. And we wanted to document it. We wanted to compile it. That's why we built his website. That's why we built his Facebook page. We've been building it, I want to say, for 7 years, 6 years, whatever it is. We were putting his articles out there, putting his Facebook, and you know, we were like, you know what, it'd be great for the generations to help eliminate false oral histories. But anyways, more for the generations. That was one component. The other component was have more dialogue on Polynesian history, origins, and not let's sit down and just one up each other with oral histories that we can manufacture, right? But really ask questions, explore, be creative, bring data, bring different people to explain their positions, um, and so forth, and just have a robust discussion. Because we believe the more people discuss and throw their ideas on the table, the bad ideas tend to die, right? Like the bad ideas tend to die when you have conversation and you know you have them challenge each other, and then and everybody can make up their mind. Everybody hears. We model our podcast after the kava discussions, you know, and in the kava discussions, when it's done correctly, ideas and information are shared and people listen and you think about it and then you make up your own mind, right? So homeboy right here jumps up. If I had come out and Mr. Ateroa and I had come out, and despite all the data pointing to Tonga, if we came out and said Samoa is the origin, he would not be saying these things. That's the only reason. Maybe, and you know what? Maybe this is why some of the people that are Tongan who are academic are so quick to just say, "Oh yeah, Samoa is the origin." Well, maybe it's play along to get along, right? When you're going into your academic career and the Samoan narrative has been there for a long time, because why? Because they were one of the benefits of colonization is access, and you get your story told first, and you get all that out, and you get into positions of influence that when you're coming up from Tonga and you try to say, oh, well, we heard that Tonga is the origin, then you would just get stuff like this, like Mr. Bo right off the bat. Oh, you are just biased. You are just confused. When we're like, why am I biased when I see all the langis and all the haamonga and the oral history of Tonga being the only one to project power, and I see Tongan ruins in Samoa, Tongan ruins in Uvea, Tongan ruins in Mangaya, in the Cook Islands. That's bias. Oh, okay. You know what? I just need my degree to graduate and take care of my family. Yeah, Samoa, you are the origin. Okay, maybe that's what happened. But let's come back over here. Um, let's come back to the story of who.
And in one of that videos, they claim that Ufi was never was not part of the Samoan diet or whatever. But in
Once again, we never said Ufi was never part of the Samoan diet. The video is literally named or talks about Ufi as a preference of Tongans. We never said, see, this is the thing. You talk about bias, but your immediate response is full of bias. We never said Samoans never eat Ufi. For Pete's sake, Masi confirmed in the video he ate Ufi maybe twice, and it's primarily Ufi Vao, and it's hard. Right? So yeah, let's continue with the story of who.
this video, I will give you guys a reason why
Mm.
Ufi was very much part of not only our diet, but it was highly valued in our culture.
Highly valued. So valued, nobody eats it basically every day. Nobody when does a Samoan wake up every day and say, I wanna eat ufi. Tongans highly value, and they mostly, yeah, if they had a preference, if they put a ufi in front of a Tongan, he probably gonna eat the ufi over the banana and the taro, more likely than not. My Samoan friends, they prefer the banana and the taro. They had a ufi, maybe, but they prefer the banana and the taro. Okay.
So the first point I would like to give you guys is in Samoa there is a royal lineage that is known as the Ngafa or Ufi. Ngafa is means lineage or the lineage of the Ufi. This was the lineage that eventually gave birth to the current Malietoa line. So here is as the Ufi is taken as a metaphor in relation to this royal lineage.
Mm. Royal lineage. Okay. All right. We already that's a probably incorrect term. Story of who? Because lineage means you have kings. And we've already reviewed the Samoan system doesn't have kings.
The second point is in Samoa, there's two types of uvi.
Two types of ufi. There's a minimum of 14 main types of ufi in Tonga. 14. And even within those 14, there are crosses and subdivisions of those 14 main groups. So you're possibly looking at anywhere between 30 to 50 different kinds. And it's highly valued. You highly value, and there's two. Once again, I'm the biased one. Okay? Stuff's not making sense. But you notice there's a lot of stories, a lot of stories, a lot of oral history. Oral history. We'll get to that. Okay? Because the story says, oh, this is very valuable to me. This is high significance. It even starts a lineage. But when I go and I look, it's basically telling me, Tua, don't believe your two eyes. Like we really value Ufi. Ufi is so important. A royal lineage came from it. But my eyes didn't see it. I drove all around Samoa, American Samoa, and Samoa, Western Samoa, right? Went to a couple markets, drove down all the roads, right? Didn't see a single Uvi my whole time. I stayed at a resort and hotels. Didn't see Ufi as an option. A lot of talo, a lot of banana. I don't think I had anything besides that and maybe rice. You want me to don't believe my lying eyes, but you want me to believe your oral history, right? Oral history. All right. Malo, expert.
That exist in Samoa ever since the beginning of time.
How do we know it's the beginning of time? Because you said so.
The first Ufi is called Palai Maui or Ufi Samoa,
Mm,
true Samoan Ufi.
mm.
The second Ufi is called Ufi New Guinea or Ufi that came from the island of New Guinea. There's no Ufi Palau, no Ufi Niue, no
Remember that data said the original Polynesians didn't have Melanesian mix, but your Ufi, your from the beginning is Nukini. Okay, okay.
Ufi Tonga or anything like that, like the Taro. We have Kalo Niue, Kalo Palau, and so forth. No, in Samoa, there's only two Ufis that exist. It's the real Samoan Ufi and the Ufi from the New Guinea island.
Mm.
So, thirdly, the story of Billy and his sister Sina, the one that married the Tuifiti.
Okay, guys, once again, a story for how significant the Ufi is, a story for the origin of the two Ufis, and now a story again. We're having another story, right?
From that story, we get the phrase
Another
that is
story.
commonly used by orators of Samoa, the saying that goes like this: "Ua tolo tolo matangau leufi asina." In that story, Billy gave his sister Sina the gift of the Ufi in order for her to survive the wrath of the Tuifiti, because at that time,
Once again, the Tui Fiti is probably the weakest of all the Tui empires out there. Hmm? Not that I think about it. In Fiji, been to Fiji 3 times. Didn't eat Ufi there, I don't think. And I don't know if I saw Ufi in Fiji. But anyways, another story. Yeah? I think we're down to like story number 3 or number 4.
the islands of Fiji was going through a massive famine. So during that famine, mind you, the Tuifiti was married to 2 women. One was Sina from Samoa, and the other one was a Fijian woman. And his ultimatum was whichever wife that helps feed not only him but his people is the one that he will save. The other one he will kill or he will eliminate. So therefore, um, Billy came to Fiji and gifted his sister the Ufi, which later on helped save her life. And don't get me started on the different delicacies or the different foods that we use or we create using the Ufi in Samoa. So the notion
So many delicacies that at every resort, every restaurant, I spent. I went to Samoa 3 times, 3 different times, probably a total of 2 months between those three, maybe 3 months. Never ate a delicacy of Ufi, not even seen a Ufi, right? But okay.
or the very biased one-sided take that was done by Polynesian Ice.
Oh, once
It's
once again, very, very biased.
basically rubbish. So there we go. But
So once again, 4 stories. The evidence that I received was 4 stories. Okay, 4 stories. That's the evidence. Mister Story of who? Oh, no wonder why the story of Poe, because Poe, the stories of stories. That's what you bring to the table. Okay, so lots of stories. And that's important because we're going to dive into why stories can be dangerous. Yeah. So let's come back here, right? We have these conversations, and so we're having conversations with the story of Bo, right? And the story of Bo right here. Let's look in the comments. And this was like what? When was this? We'll look at the date. I want to say it was last year. Maybe it was this year. Oh, 2025, June. So, halfway through the year last year, so 7 months ago. And story of Bo right here says the podcast is based on the notion to discredit and demoralize Samoa, a very biased and unfounded claims they have on the pod. I'm not in. So I'm Samoan. I have Samoan blood. Okay. I'm not here to discredit or demoralize. I'm not here to demoralize anyone. If the truth demoralizes you, man, then you have a hard life. Because if the truth demoralizes you, that means you're disconnected from reality. Can't help you with that, right? If the truth demoralizes you, story of Bo, then you have too many stories and not enough facts, not enough reality, right? You just did a video on Ufi and 4 stories. That's the evidence. 4 stories. Okay. So we responded, interesting claim. Let's do an episode to discuss this and so much more. We invited the story of Bo. He says, let's do it. And I said, that's awesome. Gave him our email. Let's lock in a time, right? But I couldn't find the other comments, but eventually we reached out to him a few times and tried to lock in a date, on messaging here because he didn't email us. So we made a couple messages here. It's like, dude, just come join us on the episode, man. We're just gonna talk. You have lots of stories to share, right? Let's just have a conversation. And I asked him a few times to join us, and I couldn't find um, you know, he says here, Toco Malo for the perspective we will respond in position. We need more discussions like this. Would be good to have the story of Bo on the podcast. We can talk about Ufi and so much more. Once again, telling him, man, just join us on the podcast. You obviously have a lot to say. Just come and talk. I can't find it, but eventually he backs out, right? He backs out. He never joins us. He goes on there and say, "Yeah, changed my mind. It's not worth it. I'm not going to talk about these guys. Not going to talk to them. They're just blah blah blah." Well, Mr. Bo apparently got the itch again, and Mr. Bo did a video yesterday. We had a different program that we were going to do today. Um, we had some interesting information sent to us by one of the viewers where they talk about, Samoa landmass wise is larger than Tonga. And they had looked at some of the numbers, but Tonga has more farmable land than Samoa. And so that was an interesting data point that they brought up. And so we were like, the question then came up is like, out of all of that, why did our ancestors select Tonga? And when I say our ancestors, I'm not just talking about Tongans. We're talking about all of Polynesia, right? Why did our ancestors pick Tonga? And then after the Polynesian Empire was established, right? You have Hawaii, you have Tahiti, you have all these places, but they still kept Tonga as the seat of power and as the capital and remained there. So we were looking at doing a program to kind of walk through that, but then this stuff comes up. You got Joe over here throwing out maps, throwing out maps that even the map proves him wrong. But apparently, Joe was married to the idea, couldn't let go. So it's like, you know what? Let's address Joe, even though I thought we addressed him on the last live digital conversation. And then we have Bo, and we're like, you know what? We're gonna put that. We'll make a mental note to come back to that program because I think that would be a great thing to kind of walk through. And then someone had mentioned for us to kind of set up what we think happened, and we'll do that. Um, we'll bring up here a lot of comments. Great to see the discussion, guys. Facebook and YouTube are active, but as we say, we always recognize our paying members on the Polynesian Eyes podcast on YouTube. So Devita Torfoki 452 says quality of the soil was the currency back then. And that's a good point. And that was some of the things that is interesting. And I'll just mention this real quick, Devita. Tonga is Tonga Tapu and all the islands, but Tonga Tapu is unusual because, and I wonder if it's because all the volcanic activity. Tonga is a coral island, right? It's not a volcanic island, but there's so much volcanic activity around Tonga and Tonga Tapu that, like the Hunga Ha'apai, the Hunga Tonga explosion, what that brought to mind was a lot of people in Tonga were kind of sharing with me that after that explosion, because of all that volcanic material, right? The dust and the rock and stuff fell. The next year, everything was like super green. Everything was like alive on steroids. And I was like, man, part of the reason why probably Tonga's soil is so rich and unique. And I agree with that. I think that's a strong point, Devita. Is it's a coral island that has a lot of volcanic activity that enriches the soil, and it's flat land. So I think there's a lot to that, and that was kind of what some of the original plan was for today, Tevita. But anyways, appreciate the subscription to the channel. And when I say subscription, being a paying member, greatly appreciate it. So coming back here, we'll come back to the story of Joe. So yeah, so we try to bring him on the channel just to have a conversation. It doesn't even it's not even really a debate. It's a conversation, discussion. It's like showing up at any kava session, right? Just going to chill. If you want to throw out some ideas, entertainment value or whatever, the story of who has lots of stories, could have just come here and share his stories. People listen to it. Whether they want to believe it or not, it is what it is. Anyways, so we offer him to come. He doesn't come, right? But apparently he says he doesn't want to deal with us because we're just so biased. And then he comes on and he makes a video, right? Stitch, #Stitch at Polynesian Eyes, another perspective. Samoa, TikTok Samoa TikTokers. Okay, all right. A lot of stories. Let's see what the story of Bo has to bring to the table here.
I mean, they're right paramount versus the Tui clashes between their right paramount versus the Tui.
Okay, so he starts it off. Maybe should we show that video? Maybe. Let me see if I can find that video. So he starts off with this video, right? And number one, I was like, oh, I thought we were too biased. Mr. Story of Who, right? We were too biased to have him come on to the podcast, and it wasn't worth it for him. So he ignored us and did, I found the video. Here we go. So it wasn't worth his time. It wasn't worth his time for him to join us. But we'll come back to this video. So this is the video he's responding to give everyone context here.
When this, you mentioned the Tui Manua and that aspect. Have you spent
and this is episode we did with Jacob Pitsemanu. He was great to have. Jacob doesn't agree with everything we say, right? He comments, I think primarily on Facebook is where Jacob, and he pushes back. He even pushed back on the Ufi thing, right? He's like, oh, I was just in Samoa and I saw this, and that, where he mentioned like a variety. And he was trying to make the point of there's a variety of things. And, I commented back to him and I said, that wasn't our point that we were pushing for, that like, there's no Ufi. Our point was that's not the preference, right? Like, and it's obvious, like we don't have to like ignore that or pretend like that's not the reality, right? But credit to Jake, man. The homeboy showed up. We had a great conversation. I learned a lot, right? And that's the whole point of this. Just because we don't agree on everything doesn't mean we can't sit down and have a conversation. So, Jake, kudos to Jake for showing up. We have a great discussion. We have a great show. Put it on. I mean, one of our best, shows on the podcast. Pretty popular. So yeah, that's what he's reacting to here.
any time on family history and kind of diving into what is the Tui Manua, what its role was, influence, impact, just anything you're willing to share on that perspective on the Tui Manua,
or oral histories that you've heard,
you've heard.
Tui Manua is interesting because, and I will first of all claim like zero immediate connection to. So my for the last 6 generations is all Upolu, Manono, and Savai. Going back further than that, we do have ties to Manua. It's funny though because Whangaloa, Safune especially, their oral histories really are based on maybe not fights, but are based on clashes between their right, paramount versus the Tui Manua, and whether that is indication of hey, this guy is overextending his reach into the Western Islands, and we got to push back at that whole like Pili and Manua stuff, right? Or Tangaloa, which is Safunes Tangaloa versus Manua, and even Malietoa and Manua. Like they're always, until very recent times, where like 1841, right, was where Malietoa Vainupo and Tui Manua Mamana like got together and supposedly said, okay, all of Samoa is ruled by God and not by kings, blah, blah, blah. But all of the stories before that are not stories about friendship, right? It's the story of how Malietoa got the Faleola from Manua was because of a fight, right? It was because of a conflict and the way that all of these things happen. And so those are the oral traditions that I have in my family are not necessary, are more about, I guess, paramounts competing or rivalries.
Anyways, so I mean that's awesome. Jake showed up. Jake had a conversation. Like I said, we don't always agree, but we had a conversation. And honestly, Jake was very pleasant, very knowledgeable across the board. The guy goes to Samoa. I think he said every year he's going to go back to Samoa here again. I think he said he was going to make the Pulemele a target, but he tries to go to Samoa every year. Jake goes on. He's a physician, but he's also in I think the House of Representatives in Utah, and he's like a pretty, I mean, not a professional anthropologist, but the guy's respected enough that they send him to go and study and document historical artifacts throughout the world, right? I think he said he went to Germany. He's looking at mats and all kinds of different things. The point is, Jake came across to me as very sincere, didn't seem biased. He had a knowledge of a lot of things, especially on genealogy and history and anthropological things. He was pretty strong there. And he was just pretty straightforward and shared things, and we talked about tuna and fata and this, and that. But it was fantastic. It was a great discussion. Really appreciate Jake, and I think we hope to have him on again when he comes back. When he comes back from Samoa and see what he finds there. And I think we even noted on a couple of his comments on Facebook, a couple areas, maybe there's a little opposing perspectives. Maybe we can discuss those, but maybe not. I don't know. Whatever. It's just a conversation, right? But he showed up, right? He showed up. This one's funny. Okay. Too much via Poto said, you and Mussy obviously haven't been to McDonald's in American Samoa where they serve McOofie wraps, the big oofie and the double cheese oofies and oofie pies. Hey, too much. That might be a t-shirt. One of these days when we have some time and some money here, we'll get some t-shirt stuff set up. But that's hilarious. That is absolutely hilarious. Anyways, let's come back to the story of Who. And apparently he had stuff to say, but he didn't want to come up and say it with us. But let's go back to him.
Talo Falava, what's up, everybody? Yeah. Before you continue on with this video, please go and watch that video in its entirety.
We did it. The story of Who. We did it. Don't worry. Malo for the advice. We took care of it.
Actually get a full understanding of what I'm about to talk about. So I'm not going to say that I am knocking on the Uso Jack and his.
And you shouldn't knock on him because he showed up. Okay? Apparently you have things to say, but you didn't want to show up. I give props to Jake. He showed up. So yeah, I wouldn't knock on him either.
His side of the stories, as he said in that
his side of the story.
These were the stories that was told in his family. but I have a few things that I don't agree with, and this is why. Samoa was ruled and governed by the authority and the pule of the Tuimanua since the beginning of the creation of the Tuimanua title and clan.
Oh, right off the bat, let's count. There's one story, one oral history there, right? From the creation of the Tuimanua, it was ruled. All right, all right.
By Tangaloa Langi.
Mm.
And as he mentioned in that video that there was he feels that there was like a feeling of from the Western Islands, as in Upolu and Sava Imanona Polima, that there was the Tuimanua's power was overreaching towards the western side. That was not the case.
Oh, another
You
story.
see,
'Cause it wasn't the
Tuya
case.
Tua and Tuya Ana, it all ties back to the Tuimanua as the children of the Tuimanua. At that time, the kingship of the Tuis or the Tuya Ana, Tuya Tua
Another
was
story.
evident in Opolu Island, but not until the creation of the Tuputa Fa'ifa title or the unification of the four Papa titles, Tuya Tua, Tuya Ana, Vaitam Soali, and Ngatu Itele, that power starts to rise.
When was the first Tafaifa title? Let's ask Grok. Let's see what Grok says. Go to it. Because that's important. So he's saying that Tu'imanua power existed and everybody recognized it until the first Tafaifa. When was the first Tafaifa? Oh, it's not working. When was the first Tafaifa in Samoa? Let's see what Grok says. I'll pull it up. Come on, Grok. So yeah, so he's saying, if I understand correctly, the first Tafaifa in Samoa. Oh, Salamasina. Okay. And Solomon is celebrated roughly 10th to 12th, 13th century. That's at the height of the Tuitonga. Okay. Which is including later Tafaifa. So he's saying to the 10th and the 13th century. The beginning of the 15th century. Okay. So 15th, 16th century. That's funny because that's around the same time that the Tu'imanua came into existence according to archaeology. So okay, so this is a good timeline there, so that we're aware of the timeline he's saying. So he's saying that Tu'imanua had control until about the 15th century.
From the western side.
So that's 1600s, 1700s. Everyone would 1700s, 1600s. People would have remembered that, even in Tonga, but that doesn't exist.
It was the creation of the Tuputa Fa'ifa title that was the only kingship and rulership that was equal to that of the Tuimanua.
And what the first Tafaifa, according to this, Nafanua, warrior princess. So it was a woman. Okay. So it's a woman. Notice that women, like we said, women have a very, very powerful role in Samoa. Interesting. Centralized power comes from there. Okay.
It was at that time the decentralization of power from Manua started to shift.
Oh, another story.
Power was started to shift towards the Western Islands or towards Upolu and Savai. Another thing he mentioned in that, he said there were clashes and fights between Whangaloa and Safune and the Tuimanua. There were no fights between Whangaloa or Safune and the Tuimanua. But there is a great importance of Whangaloa and Safune in the Samoan history. As
I want to highlight this. The only evidence he's bringing to the table is a story. Right? The only evidence he's bringing is a story. And this is the problem. Jake came with his story. Okay, his story. That's what he believes. All story of who is bringing is another story. So really, at the end of the day, this is just his story versus his story, but it's not history. His story versus his story, but it's not history. Right? It's not recorded. It's not confirmed.
As it is different from Tonga. See, Tonga has only one langi in Tonga.
I hate to break it to you, buddy. There's many langis in Tonga. Right? You say you have 9 langis over there. There's many langis. There's more langis, and there's more earth mounts. So no, there's not just one langi. There's many langis. See, this is the problem. This is the problem when a story runs into facts. This is what happens when a story has to be tied to a ruin or a physical feature. The story is either proven correct or false very quickly. Right? In Tonga, there's only one langi. No, there's lots of langi in Tonga. Right? Unless he's meaning something else, but there's lots of langi in Tonga.
Samoa langi, the langi sautuaiva or the 9 heavens of Tangaloa, existed in Manua, existed in Whangaloa, and it also existed in Safune in Savai. So that is the difference between Tonga and Samoa in that sense. And this is why Safune and Whangaloa is very important. There were never a clash between them. Only
Another story.
in
Only
Whangaloa,
story.
where the case of Lu Fasiaitu, who went against the family of Tangaloa Langi. That was the significance of Whangaloa.
Another story.
In terms of
Okay.
Safune, see, Funefe'ai, the warrior king that was,
Here's another story.
he ruled and he
I'm
ruled
counting
that
like
part of
7
Hawaii,
or
and
8
he
stories
waged a
here.
lot of war. At the same time, he had a really beautiful wife. And Tangaloa Langi, also not the Tumanua, Tangaloa Langi.
And the Tangaloa Langi is supposed to be above the Tu'imanua, right? Right? That's right. Okay, so the most sacred title.
Envied, and he wanted the wife of Funefe'ai to be his. So he asked Funefe'ai for her hand, and Funefe'ai in turn he asked Tangaloa, I will give you my wife, but in return I want the honorifics.
So just let me get this straight. The most powerful and legendary title and leadership, kingship has to go ask. He has to go ask. That's not how the most powerful and most ancient title is. Let me just break it to you. Right? Once again, this is the thing about stories. You can just make up a story. Right?
And I want the title Tangaloa to be given to me. It was only then that the title of Tangaloa was given to a mortal man. You see, he mentioned.
So that's all. That's how it happens. I'm seeing a trend here, right? The women are extremely influential, and women are always part of the story here. So the title of Tangaloa is just a matter of barter, right? It's just a matter of, oh, I want to be the Tangaloa. I just gotta make an exchange, right? That's how it works. You see how you can manufacture a story like that? But when it's Tangaloa is not something you can buy or exchange, it's something that's inherited. It's something that money cannot buy. It's something that even war cannot win you. Right? That's why the Tangaloa story in Tonga, which we say Tangaloa resided on Tapuhia, also known as Langi, in Folaha on Tongatapu. Even with the story, like inheritance and structure is so important. You ain't just gonna go like the most powerful and legendary name and title. You want me to believe it's gonna be just given for an exchange? You see, to me, what this tells me more is the perception on how power can be obtained in Ha'amoa. And how do you do that? It's like intermarriage, right? And we see this a lot lived up to that perception in marrying into the Tuitonga. That's how power and prestige was obtained. That to me, this story is not telling me how Tangaloa title was passed on. It's telling me the perceptions of power and influence and how it's obtained, and it's through intermarriage. That's what that's telling me, because it makes zero sense that the most important thing is that, right? And when we look at Aho'eitu and Tangaloa, because Aho'eitu is the youngest, and Aho'eitu has an oldest brother who's the heir, you notice Aho'eitu doesn't get the Tangaloa title because it belongs to the oldest, right? And that, they call it now, that title or that inheritance belongs to the oldest. And that's why the oldest still maintains it, but they're reassigned roles. The oldest brother, his title is renamed to Ifareua, right? And Aho'eitu is to Itonga. You see that? That's the difference, because it's inheritance, it's in the blood, right? So, but over here, apparently, to get the most powerful, influential title, you just go exchange your wife. Sounds a lot like the Tonga Fusfonua story. How do you get the most powerful tool to pull up islands and so forth? You just go to the wife and have the wife trick her husband to give away the hook, right? I don't know. Manufacturing of oral histories, starting to see a pattern.
That Malietoa and Tumanua had a rift. There was never a rift between the two.
Another
Malietoa
story.
used to travel to Manua
Another,
and play what
another-
we call in
once again, a story to counter a story. That's what we're dealing with, right? Oh, you have an oral history? I'm going to come with an oral history. You come with an oral history? I come, right? But once you try to tie your oral history to a ruin, in an actual physical feature that's recognized and accepted, all of a sudden the story falls apart. But anyways, lots of stories. The story of who is very good at telling a story for a story.
Samoa Palopalonga, where another king or another god king would test the other in terms of trials and tests, or actually ask them to do a dare even. So this was very common in the royals and the
Very
paramount and high
common.
chiefs of Samoa back in the day.
So let me get this straight. The most high paramount chief is going to accept a dare or a challenge from a lower ranking chief. What would he have to gain? I mean, all he has is risk. You must not be that powerful or that high ranking if I can just come and challenge you and dare you, right? That's not how it works. In the real world, in the world of stories, the story of who says some willy-nilly guy can show up, challenge the most powerful paramount chief to a challenge. You're gonna get shot first before you even get your challenge out of your mouth.
So they also mentioned that Malietoa had to get into some disagreement with Te Manua, hence why the Faleula or Te
Oh,
Manua
another
is still the
story's
thing.
coming. Another
But that
story.
is not true. What
This-
is true is that
It's not true because I have another story to counter that.
before the coinage or before the title Malietoa came to be, Faleula o le Tuimanua was already in
Another
Upolu.
story. Yes,
I
another
think it's
story.
either 1 or 2 generations before the title of Malietoa came to existence.
Ah,
This was because Malauatea went to Manua to bring back his sister that was married to the Tuimanua. And the
once again, always a woman. These stories, it's like these stories are woven. It's like when you watch a Hollywood movie, these stories are woven with the same kind of like features, just, move it around, a little bit. But a story for a story. What can I say? The story of who?
Manua also put him through trials and tests, 3 of them, where he actually completed those 3 tests, brought back his sister, and also asked to bring the Faleula of the Tuimanua to Upolu. So these are the reasons why I'm making this video, is to clarify that this is the perspective of what I've studied, what I've been taught,
What have you studied? Right?
and most of the oral histories of Samoa is united on these stories. Hence why I'm making this video. Like I said before, the also opinion and the stories that he was told, that's for him. But this is the stories that I've been told, and this is the most common with a lot uh, of evidence that
Hey, your story and my story, even though I didn't bring any evidence, but mine has more evidence because I said my story has more evidence. Right? I don't know, man. I listened to Jake and I listened to you. I kind of think Jake is probably has more evidence than you. That's just my 2 cents. Right? But you got a lot of stories. You got good stories, I guess.
testify to
Testify, malo.
to the stories that I am telling you guys. So, anyways, enjoy. Choo.
Yeah, enjoy the story. Thank you. So this is the challenge of just having stories and more stories, right? Is if all we really have is an oral history or an oral story, then we don't have anything else besides a story, and someone else can just come up with another story, and we just go in the one up, my story, your story, my story, your story, my story. It never ends, and this is the problem, right? And it's this never ending cycle, and it's just a story upon story upon story. Now, the next part is, it seems pretty prevalent, and we're going to bring something up. So the next part we're going to close out today is the Samoan oral history legal system. Yes, there is a legal system to deal with oral stories, oral history. Now, before we even dive into what it is, what it's about, why would you need a legal system for oral history, my dear friends? Would you have a legal system to deal with oral histories because there's a problem of oral histories being made up? Well, maybe. Why else would you have a legal system, right? And so let's dive into that. Let's try and understand that a little bit, right? Because the guy's name, I didn't think about this. The guy's hashtag or his handle is literally the story of Bo. So he's good at telling stories, right? So can't make this stuff up, man. Can't make this stuff up. All right, we're gonna share a screen here. We're gonna go and look at where is it? All right, we're gonna do a little bit of a discussion on, does Samoa have a legal system to address oral history claims? Right? Says, yes, Samoa has a specialized legal system that explicitly addresses claims involving oral history, particularly in the context of customary land disputes, matai, chiefly titles, and related customary matters. So there is a legal system set up specifically to manage oral histories. So there is a tendency to manufacture, exaggerate, overemphasize oral histories. That's really what it boils down to, right? So the primary institution is the Land and Titles Court of Samoa, LTC, which operates under the Constitution of Samoa and the Land and Titles Act, originally 1981, with significant reforms in 2020. The court has exclusive jurisdiction over disputes relating to customary land, which makes up about 80% of Samoa's land and is held communally under Matai authority, right? So it's customary land, and it's 80% of the land over there in Samoa. Second, Matai titles and the rights obligations of title holders. Okay, so land, titles, interpretation of Samoan customs and usages. So it's oral histories over those things. You can apply all of those to the Tui Manua, Tangaloa. Those are all titles, claims on land, and customary things. Okay. Samoan customary law, the Fa'amatai, relies heavily on oral traditions, including genealogies, historical narratives, and oral evidence passed down through generations. These are central to proving claims in the LTC, the land court, as written records for customary matters are often limited or non-existent due to the oral nature of the Samoan history and culture. The court decides cases according to customary law, Samoan law, not English common law or equity, as explicitly stated in reforms. Features judges and assessors qualified by character, ability, standing, and reputation in custom, often including experts in traditional knowledge. Conducts proceedings in Samoan following customary protocols, which naturally incorporate oral testimony, histories, and traditions. Oral history and evidence play a key role in resolving disputes over land boundaries, ownership, title succession, and family claims. For example, evidence like genealogies, burial sites, honorific titles, and traditional narratives is commonly presented and evaluated. So, in summary, Samoa's legal framework not only recognizes but is built around incorporating oral history into the education of customary claims, preserving Samoa, the Samoan way, in a modern legal context. Right? So, once again, you have this because there's an issue with oral history, right? And that's something that is a challenge, and it's well recognized, and there's a legal system to address it. So that's one of the problems with the oral histories, and Samoa recognizes that there's an issue with oral histories, the weaknesses with oral histories, and there's a legal system to work through it, because there's going to be conflicts, because there's going to be issues, because Jake can come on and have his oral history, the story of who can come in with his oral history, and what do we do when these is a consistent issue and oral histories become a problem. That's why oral histories can't be relied upon, and that's why stories is a story until you can tie it to other things. That's not an issue that really arises in Tonga, because it is extremely structured. It is centralized power, and it's been running in a system that's been around for 3,000 years. That has been centralized, and there's a lot of structure and order to it. So There is not an incentive per se to manufacture and develop a new oral history. That's just the reality in Tonga. It's not as helpful, and it doesn't really give you a lot of advantage to come up with the oral history and think that that's going to get you a title. You just can't come up with an oral history and think that that's going to give you land, right? That's just not how it works. Like, the oral histories don't give you those things in Tonga. And so Tonga doesn't have the same issues with that. And so I'm trying to see here. There was a paper that we did a podcast on that walked through some of the issues and the challenges of oral histories. And let me see here. See if I can find it. Artifact. I don't know if I can find it here, but there is declining history and review. I'm trying to see if I can find it because it discusses the oral histories and some of those challenges and how the understanding of oral history can be manufactured. So I can't quite find it, but I'll probably just give a summary of it. So basically, they walk through an example of, so the study was a study on a compilation of about 200 or 300 oral histories that were gathered, that were documented, that they knew. And so they did a study on it, they analyzed it, and tried to find patterns in it, right? And the one of the keys that they found was how oral histories and generating or manufacturing oral history can be a very effective tool to avoid physical conflict in the short term while positioning future generations to have claim on land. And they use the example of land. And what they said is, here's the example. There are two groups, right? One group has a claim to the land. There's another group who says they have a claim to the land, and they're at risk of physical conflict. The group that doesn't have the direct claim to the land will generate and manufacture an oral history to the next and the following generation on why they have rights to the land. And nothing happens in this generation. But the second and third generation, that's where the claims come. Is now that this oral history has gone through 2 to 3 generations, they can now take that claim and try to a court and try to exact rights to land. Same thing can happen for a title. Same thing can happen. And so that's a trend or an example of how they see oral histories can be generated and manufactured to get access or claim. Now imagine that to Imanua, to Itonga, Polynesian Empire, and the oral histories can be generated that cannot necessarily be corroborated by physical evidence, by ruins, and just scientific data, right? And then when you question them on, well, this This place has scientific data. This place has ruins. This place has verified or recognized influence. And you don't. Well, why did? Oh, because our oral history is just way older, right? The reason why you don't recognize or remember the Tu'imanua is because it's so old, like our old histories have it, but you don't. Oh, well, how convenient, right? And says, well, why don't you have? I think my throat's trying to tell me it's time to call it a night. The reason why we don't have archaeological evidence is because it's so sacred. We don't want any people digging there, even though we found there's actual archaeological studies that prove otherwise. But our position is going to be it's so sacred, we're not allowing them to dig there, right? And so that's really the problem with it, and that speaks for itself. So, story of who? I guess appreciate you responding to our story online. Hard to take you seriously. We invited you to come to tell your side of the story. You didn't want to do it because it wasn't worth your time, but apparently it's still worth your time to respond to our videos online. And I guess that helps us, gets us more exposure. But once again, it seems like you're just really good at telling stories. The story of who? So, with that being said, Mr. Aotearoa is traveling abroad. He is out in the land down under in Australia. So hopefully in the next few weeks he'll be able to join us. There's a couple other topics, especially on New Zealand politics, that we wanted to kind of go through on the New Zealand First Party. Saw some cool videos, and I know Mr. Aotearoa is a supporter of New Zealand First, and there seems to be a lot of political activity going on in New Zealand that I thought would be interesting to discuss. We're holding it for when he comes back. Want to say thank you to all of our paying members on the Polynesian Eyes channel on YouTube. Appreciate it very much. If you want to contribute to the efforts, you can sign up, become a paying member on the YouTube channel. You can add super thanks in your comments on our videos, super chats during our live videos. A like, a share, a comment goes a very long way. Please do so. If you aren't, please subscribe. That's another way to contribute. Really appreciate that. And as always, we say, be bold. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. And always, always stay curious. Till next time, peace. Thank you for joining us on this live digital kava session. Malo.